We all think we know the story of Adolf Hitler, right? History's ultimate villain. But what if that story is missing some huge pieces? Today, we're going to look beyond the man himself and investigate the system that might have created the monster.
So let's just dive right in with that central question. Was Adolf Hitler some kind of singular, unique force of evil? Or was he actually the predictable result of a system of greed, politics, and power that was already broken?
You know, those were Hitler's final defiant words. It's unsettling, to say the least. It suggests he truly believed history would somehow prove him right. Now, we are not here to do that. Not at all. We're here to understand the world that could let a man like that believe such a thing in the first place.
The story we all learn in school is pretty simple, pretty familiar. You've got a broken Germany after World War I, just desperate for a savior. Then, this charismatic speaker comes out of nowhere, promising to bring back national pride. It's a very clean, very straightforward story of good versus evil.
But see, the stage was already set by this document right here, the Treaty of Versailles. It wasn't really about peace. It was punishment. It plunged an entire country into absolute chaos. I mean, we're talking about hyperinflation so bad, people were using wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. That kind of desperation, that kind of national humiliation, it creates a perfect vacuum for an extremist to step right in.
But here's where the simple story starts to get, well, a lot more complicated. Was Hitler's evil really in a class all by itself? When you start comparing him to other leaders from the 20th century, the question of who gets remembered as the ultimate villain gets pretty murky.
6 million. It's a number that represents a systematic, industrial-scale genocide. It is, without a doubt, one of the absolute darkest chapters in human history. The horror of the Holocaust is undeniable.
But then you have this number. Joseph Stalin's regime in the Soviet Union was responsible for an estimated 20 million deaths. We're talking purges, forced labor in the gulags, and famines that were engineered on purpose. 20 million.
And it doesn't stop there. Over in China, Mao Zedong's policies led to a famine that killed as many as 40 million people. If you're just looking at the sheer numbers, these atrocities are just on a staggering scale, dwarfing the death toll of the Holocaust.
And this is where the story takes a really bizarre turn. Joseph Stalin, the man responsible for 20 million deaths, was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Not once, but twice. Meanwhile, Hitler became the single, undisputed face of evil for the entire planet.
So what gives? If it's not just about the body count, why is Hitler the one we all point to? Well, the sources we're looking at suggest an answer you've probably heard before. History is written by the victors. The Allies won the war, and they needed a single, central villain to justify the unbelievable cost of that war, and to paint themselves as the clear-cut heroes. Hitler, the guy who lost, he was the perfect fit.
You know, that narrative is also super convenient, because it lets us ignore the fact that Hitler wasn't some lone wolf. He was actively supported and even enabled by a whole network of powerful corporate interests. And some of their names are still on products you use today. And this wasn't some big secret. IBM provided the punch card technology that was crucial for the Nazis to efficiently identify and persecute their victims. Major German car companies like Volkswagen, Porsche, and BMW, they were basically part of the war machine. And even across the ocean, Henry Ford was such a big fan of the regime that they gave him a medal. This was not one man against the world. This was a system of powerful people who saw him as useful. So, the support he gained was important, but the support he lost might have been just as crucial. We're about to get into one of the most controversial arguments from our sources, the idea that the real fight wasn't just about ideology. It was about who controls the money. So in 1933, Hitler did something really bold. He basically told the powerful international private banks to take a hike and had the German government issue its own money. Now, from a purely national economic view, the results were, well, insane. In just 5 years, Germany went from over 30% unemployment to almost zero unemployment. And they did it all without taking on debt from these huge global banks. So the sources we're digging into here raise a really provocative question. Is there a pattern? They point to other leaders who challenged that global financial system, like Abraham Lincoln issuing greenbacks during the Civil War, or Gaddafi's plan for a gold-backed African currency. And they note that these leaders often ended up assassinated or overthrown. The implication is that World War II might have been, at least in part, about taking out a leader who broke the unwritten rules of global finance.
So when you put all these pieces together, the flawed treaty, the, let's call it selective outrage over atrocities, the corporate involvement, and this whole financial angle, a much, much more complicated picture of World War II starts to come into focus.
And that leads us to this idea of a shared evil. See, by piling all the blame onto one guy, we conveniently get to ignore the failures of the entire global system. It lets the Allied powers who created that punishing treaty off the hook. We forget about the corporations that made a fortune off the war, and all the political games that made the conflict pretty much inevitable.
And that really is the main takeaway here. The story of Hitler isn't just about the evil that one man can do. It's a huge warning sign about how desperation, corporate greed, and powerful financial interests can come together to create the absolute perfect storm for a monster to take power. If we don't get how that system works, we're just doomed to watch it happen again.
Now, let's be crystal clear about something. None of this is to excuse the man himself. His own family was so horrified by what he did that they made a pact to never have children, just to make sure his bloodline ended with them. The point of this explainer isn't to make excuses for a villain, but to try and understand the messy, complicated world that made his rise even possible.
And so, that leaves us with this one final, crucial question. It's the ultimate chicken and egg problem of history, isn't it? Was Hitler some evil genius who bent an entire nation to his will? Or was he just the right guy in the right place at the right time, taking advantage of a system that was already completely broken? The real answer is probably somewhere in the middle.